Cooking Companions is back with a prequel expanding on the story and the origin of the Chompettes, the characters represented in food items who met tragic ends under the hands of the brutal supernatural entity of the cabin. If you haven't watched the previous videos, I highly recommend you to do so in order to get the full scope of the story. Hi folks, I'm R, and welcome to a story which asserts the thought why going to abandoned cabins in the middle of the woods is a bad idea. Just don't go to abandoned cabins because it's the basis of all horror movies and stories. Keep in mind that this video will have spoilers, and with that said, let's begin. Having an encounter with Raspberry, the protagonist refers to it as Raina, apologizing for something that he has done. Raspberry, saying that she was the last to die, holding a grudge against the protagonist, asks him to get rid of Potato. Depending on what the protagonist says, different outcomes occur. If protagonist refuses, Raspberry transforms into a demonic entity, scaring the protagonist, but going with the other choice, Raspberry becomes more accommodating, telling the protagonist to become more social and stop old habits. This clearly refers to how the protagonist tricked visitors and ate their flesh previously, including the victims in the main game. The conversation soon leads to the protagonist showing how he's not afraid of Raspberry anymore, when she decides to remind the protagonist of what he did to them when the game starts as a past memory. Raina, being accompanied by 3 other people, Selena, Oleg, and Bolek, she gets called by Selena, inviting her into the notorious cabin in the woods, which they just found. Raina, being concerned about a psychopath that chased them earlier, the companions inform her not to worry as they lost him a few kilometers ago. Selena explains to Raina that they will go back to Zakopane the next day, just intending to take respite for a short night before doing so. The companions going inside the cabin and looking around, they realize it's fully abandoned, despite having blankets and seeming as if someone lives there. Selena, being the intuitive one, she instructs the companions not to make fire, as this would possibly attract the psychopath who was chasing them, with Bolek and Oleg complaining, saying that the cabin is freezing. Something harrowing starts to happen, drawing similarities between Bolek and one of the Chompettes that was held captive by the protagonist, Brett, who makes puns and jokes whenever he gets nervous. The color theme for the characters' text box also match up with the Chompettes, Bolek having brown color matching bread, Oleg having blue matching onion, Selena having green matching cabbage, and Raina having purple matching raspberry. As Bolek makes a joke, he brings up Raziel, the cornbread that is unlocked in one of the endings in the original game, the person who seemingly got released by the protagonist, unlike the other Chompettes. This leaves out Potato to who he might be, with one potential character, the psychopath that is chasing after the companions. As it was explained in the original game, Potato was a psychopath who seemed to enjoy killing. As the companions decide to settle in for the night, each decide to take responsibilities around the cabin to prepare it for their comfort. Selena goes to the kitchen to prepare some food when Raina decides to join in order to help her. Looking around, Raina finds a creepy note inside the oven of a child being taken into the cabin, with a note talking about a secret. Searching the kitchen some more, a flashback soon reveals how the companions ended up in the cabin and how the psychopath started chasing them. In the flashback, Raina and Selena go to a stream in order to perform a traditional ritual called drowning of Majana, or in Polish, topienie Majani, which has pagan origins where people burn a doll then subsequently drown it, which is the representation of an old Slavic goddess of winter, plague and death. This was performed in hopes of having a timely arrival of spring and to stay safe from the grasp of the goddess or the witch to stay protected from the cold. Just as performing this ritual, Raina notices a stranger who is acting suspiciously and staring at them, having a distinctive look of having greasy hair and throwing stones at the stream. Back to the current time in the cabin, Bolek informs the group about a toy boat that he found, which belongs to no other than Raziel, a friend of the group who had been missing for a long time. Happy they found the belonging of Raziel, with shimmers of hope of finding him, they go on a search looking for him. As the group disperses, Raina is left on her own when she hears strange sounds coming from the kitchen. Going there, she hears a child speaking Portuguese, speaking on how he was separated from his parents across the ocean and taken to the cabin by an entity that will devour everyone. This voice then continues warning Raina that this entity will devour all of them if they don't leave this cursed place at once. Raina, not understanding what the voice is saying in Portuguese, explains to the voice that she doesn't understand, when the voice responds in Portuguese that he doesn't understand Polish very well either, as Raina and her group speak Polish as they are from Poland. The voice then passes Raina a drawing, saying it belonged to a person who drew it before dying, which displays bars of a cage or prison seemingly looking into a door, maybe cages placed in the basement of the cabin. Raina, starting to become terrified, goes to the living room, shouting for her group, who she is revealed to see. They inform her that they found a fence down the hill, which had many bones around it, a fence that was mentioned in the creepy note found in the oven about someone being taken to the cabin from a fence. The group decides not to separate anymore, probably making one of the smartest decisions, sticking together in order to increase their chances of survival for whatever vicious animal or entity there might be having malicious intents. As they head to beds to sleep, Raina thinks about the butcher of Zakopane and the most recent victim who was stabbed multiple times. It's revealed then that the group left Zakopane in search of Raziel, thinking the butcher might have had a hand in it. According to the main game, the Butcher of Zakopane was active in 1862, therefore, this means the story is taking place at this time. It's been 1 year since they started searching for Raziel, with them able to get to many crime scenes before the investigators, which is all thanks to Oleg's grandmother, who was an actual investigator, giving useful tips to them in order to find Raziel. Raina then proceeds to have a strange dream, seeing the greasy-haired man just having committed a murder, making eye contact with her. As he slowly approaches her to get rid of any witness, his face peels from his cheeks, causing him to screech in agony. That's when Raina awakens in cold sweat, thankful it was just a dream. She then hears shouts from Bolek, who informs the group that he heard something from outside, when Raina realizes it's the greasy-haired man here to butcher them all. The group looks outside and notices the rain clouds are forming, which could soon rain, creating deep mud, preventing the stranger from coming in and posing a danger to them. They make a plan how to outsmart the stranger, giving each other certain responsibilities and ultimately going down to the basement as a last resort. Bolek then proceeds to hand Raina a drawing of a child sitting on a table, eating a steak, while a monstrous presence is right in front of him. They consider that this could have been Raziel, who was held captive by a monstrous entity. As they stand around, the greasy-haired man kicks down the door with his knife in hand, being drenched in rainwater, looking very unstable, as if ready to kill every last one of them. The group in a panic rush to the basement, locking the door behind them for now being safe, buying some time before the man breaks through. As the stranger starts breaking down the door, the group quickly goes down to the basement in order to find some hiding spots, using the dark as their advantage. During their descent, Raina has some flashbacks on how they met Raziel, being Bolek's cousin, who had some fantastic puns which he mentioned from a book. Bolek, currently being bred, remembered some of his puns and kept bringing them up in his memory to lighten the mood. Walking down to the basement, which feels like miles, they reach a base with certain items, which has another staircase leading even further lower into the ground. Finally, coming across 4 doors, which all of them being locked apart from the one leading to the east. They open it and enter when they come across someone with a knife, when it's left ambiguous to be whether the greasy-haired man or the protagonist of the main game who butchered and consumed the visitors. This person wielding the knife informs the group to say hi to Raziel for them, which could mean that he's actually the butcher of Zakopane, depicting that he was the one who killed Raziel, just a child. when suddenly stabbing sounds are heard, followed by a grunt by the man wielding the knife, with the companions being shocked to what they see, running for their lives in horror of what they witnessed. In a split second, the Chompettes appear in the drawer, being the representation of the 4 companions and the greasy-haired man, displaying how they all died and transformed into these food items. The bread is Bolek, cabbage is Selena, onion is Oleg, raspberry is Raina, and potato is the greasy-haired man. This shows how the greasy-haired man seemingly cornered the group, but the protagonist of the main game, the demonic being, killed him with ease, then proceeded to kill the rest of the group, hence why they were horrified to what they saw, running for their lives in fear instead of standing their ground to fight it. The Chompettes at first show animosity and hate towards their killer and Potato, but as time passes, with the killer leaving them shut in the drawer for days on end, the Chompettes realize how they are fully powerless and are trapped to their thoughts, left to suffer with no end. A drying Potato found earlier while exploring the cabin through mouse holes, he raises his curiosity and interest of what it is, with a child weeping, having his limbs cut off, with several demonic beings surrounding him, which depicts that the killer is not just one single being, but multiple, whether linked together as a hive mind or separate entities independent from each other. On the other hand, these entities might represent the visitors who went to the cabin and had a taste for the meat of the other humans or visitors, which becomes the monsters that they are depicted to be on the drawing. This in a way gives a nod to the original game when Grigor had his limbs removed, with the other visitors and Karen having a taste for his meat, becoming a monstrous being, even developing supernatural abilities. So maybe the protagonist is only one single being who traps the visitors in the cabin, giving them the meat or the flesh of the other visitors or humans from the past, somehow making them stoop low to his level, ultimately becoming monstrous beings. The Chompettes, as a result, then devise a plan to play along in order for the killer entity to just let them go, so their souls and consciousness can be free. But Potato, the greasy-haired man, being a psychopath and seemingly enjoying the discovery of a brutal supernatural killer, wants to stay and witness the brutality. Someone who seems to have extra privilege of exploring the cabin through mouse holes. As the entity witnesses the Chompettes having argument amongst themselves, he finds them entertaining, planning to keep them for much longer, not willing to let them go, trapping their souls for years to come, as the main game seems to take place many decades after 1862. That's why the Chompettes still play along and act nicely, but at the same time, they start realizing and accepting that they are never going to be freed, breaking character and acting hostile towards the killer protagonist. As after all, they had been savagely murdered and somehow reincarnated into these food items, held captive against their own will, just for the protagonist's entertainment. And that's it for Cooking Companions DLC, folks. Make sure to stay tuned, as I'm planning to make subsequent videos about all of the other endings. It's been your host Star. Until the next time, have a fantastic day.